Well, hello, dear listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Reforming Nerdom podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jordan Cecile, and I am joined, as always, by P. Nate, a.k.a. Pastor Nate, a.k.a. Nathaniel P. Wright. Nate, how are you?
I'm doing well, although you didn't notice that I signed into Riverside as Han Solo today, so you can call me that too if you want. I just figured I'd have to call dibs if we ever do like a costume party. I'm Han Solo, and you guys can fight over whoever else.
You know what? If we ever did have to do an episode where we're like, which Star Wars character would we be? I would definitely not be Chewie. That would be the one that I would absolutely not be.
Yeah.
All right, and we're also joined by Benjamin, a.k.a. Ben of the Cloth, a.k.a. Ben Emery. Ben, how are you?
I am doing just fine. I did not sign in as Han Solo or any other Star Wars character, so
well, Nate
shame on me. I don't know.
He has officially marked his territory, so now we need to fight over Luke. I mean, like, that's a real discussion over, is it older Luke, younger Luke? Because that's a big difference between
does make
who
a big
actually
difference.
want to be Luke. But yeah, well, welcome everybody. This is the Reforming Nerdom podcast.
It's not a discussion. It's Empire Strikes Back Luke is the only, only answer.
I just watched that, or I'm in the middle of watching that with the kids right now. And it's
so good.
Just, we'll get to it. As people can probably tell by the title of this show, we will get to it. But this is Reforming Nerdom, where each and every week we get together and discuss all things nerd culture from an unapologetically Christian world view. If you like watching the show, you can check us out on YouTube. If you like listening, you can check us out on podcast services. And if you really want to get connected and hang out, you can join us over on Patreon and our Discord community, where we're having lots of fun over there. Now, before we get into our topic of the show, I just wanted to highlight one news story that I came across the other day, and it is related to our Skeleton Crew watch along and review that Ben and I are doing, and also to our topic of Star Wars today. But this was one, Ben, I think you and I have both seen just online that we've been pretty surprised by the lack of viewership in Skeleton Crew, because it's actually pretty unanimously
surprised
right now.
Yeah, surprised because it's actually a pretty good show. Not surprised because it's coming off the heels of The Acolyte.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and it has been really disappointing because people are actually missing out on what is seemingly a really good show. So interestingly, so this was an article from Collider, and in this article, the writer is saying that it seems to be turning around in terms of viewership, because I think when it launched, it wasn't even in the top 10 on Disney's their streaming, like their top shows in Canada or worldwide. But now, according to this article, it says it seems the force is strong with Star Wars on Disney Plus. Following its highly anticipated release earlier this month, Skeleton Crew has quickly become a hit, rocketing to the number two spot on the streaming service's top 10 list.
Just as like the problem is, though, it wasn't a highly anticipated release. Like that was the whole. It was like if you weren't looking for it, you didn't even know this show existed.
Like I saw some ads for it. Like I don't know if you guys when we're watching sports and stuff. Like I was seeing ads leading up to it. I don't know if you guys do.
Maybe I just don't watch enough.
Yeah,
I don't either.
Television, I guess, or whatever. But
yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I just thought it was, all quiet on the Western Front as far as Skeleton Crew goes.
Yeah, like they were pushing it. I don't know if they were pushing it as much as other shows, but I was definitely seeing some ads for it.
Yeah.
But positively, it's now in the top 10, and I just anecdotally just looking at Disney yesterday, it was number 1 in the top shows being watched, at least in Canada. So it seems like people are becoming aware of it. I think they're just seeing a lot of the positive stuff. And I think a big reason why people are starting to follow it again is you have some of the, and I think I already mentioned this, some of the big YouTube channels that do the searching for Easter eggs, and they watch with really discerning eye and find things and pick out stuff and theorize and what's going to happen.
You mean like the Reforming Nerdom Skeleton Crew after show?
That one. That
YouTube
one,
channel?
because we're just taking over the internet with that one.
Yeah.
But the ones that have a slightly higher reach than we do, they're picking it up and they're now doing it. So I think we're starting to see that you and I were onto something in reviewing this. So we were ahead of the curve. But
Trendsetters.
some of these bigger channels are doing it as well. So I'm wondering if that's been leading to a lot of people watching, because if it's worth their time, people who watch their channels are probably checking it out as well. So,
Yep.
Anyways, positive. If you want to hear more about what Ben and I think of Skeleton Crew, you can go check out that on YouTube or the main podcast feed. But yeah, I was just happy to hear that. It looks like the show is getting the audience it deserves. I mean, Disney earned that failure because of Acolyte and some of the other stuff they've been doing, but I think credit where credit is due is important. So that was really good. So now, before we get even into our and kind of discuss our topic of the show, there's a few things that I was thinking we could do today. It's a big topic, Star Wars. There's a lot of things, like, so as you could tell from the title, we're wanting to talk about Star Wars, but specifically what made the original trilogy what it was, and what I think all three of us would say is the best. I think most Star Wars fans would say the original trilogy is the best. But before we even get into that, there's a couple things that I was wanting to do. And one of them was just a did you know? And perhaps you guys knew some of this. I thought there were some kind of interesting Star Wars facts that I came across. And let me know if you've heard this or if not. So did you know that I Am Your Father was a twist that only Mark Hamill, George Lucas, and the director knew about when they were about to film it?
I did know that.
I
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah,
And
nobody else knew that.
Yeah, so the original twist was because even when they filmed it, the voice, the guy who, not James Earl Jones, but the guy in the suit, didn't say "I am your father." He said the like made up line that they were trying, that because they didn't want it to get out.
Interesting.
And so Mark Hamill's reaction, which is like ridiculous, when he's like screaming no, and there's like snot dripping down his face, and everyone on set was just like, well, that seems like a bit of an overreaction, like,
do you know what that line was?
I'm trying to remember it. It's oh shoot, I can't. I think it. No, I don't. Yeah,
it is.
You could look it up super quick. Here,
I have it right here.
You keep talking, I'll look it up.
No, I have it.
Or you have it. Oh, okay, yeah.
It was Obi-Wan killed your father.
Yeah, Obi-Wan. Okay, yeah, that's what it was.
So that was So I mean,
so that was never actually like the intention. That was just inserted so that no one on set would, let it slip.
Wow.
Real quick tangent on that whole keeping the end spoiler free. So Nate, and actually both of you reading the Stormlight Archive, you guys are now both in it. I mean, Nate, and you're a little bit further along. So at some point we're gonna talk about that very much in depth.
I think Audible tells me I still have like 33 hours to go. So
yeah, but so the thing I just heard about was somebody shared this with the new Wind and Truth book. Brandon Sanderson has beta and alpha readers, so like to help him polish the story, and sometimes he'll have different parts for different ones and get feedback and see which one they like better. And so it's like quite a big team that's in it. But apparently he sent out 3 different endings to the book to all of his readers.
Oh, wow. Just to keep
it. Didn't use any of it because he wanted it to be a surprise for them as well when they were reading it.
Oh, cool. That's cool.
So he didn't use any of it. Nobody.
So he wrote 4 endings.
Yes.
To his book. That's amazing.
Yeah. And for him, that means the ending was 300 pages.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So take those endings. It's like 1,200
separate book.
Yeah,
3 of them.
So I thought that was kind of cool. And a little bit of a thing for his like alpha beta readers where it's like, hey, I got you, have fun, like kind of a treat to them as well. I thought that was cool.
As far as Star Wars is concerned, though, like that level of secrecy that I pretty much started with Empire, like there was no real twist or anything like that with A New Hope. But starting with Empire, with the I Am Your Father reveal, like that is carried on to like current Star Wars, like if you go and you act in a Star Wars movie or show, it's like you got to sign your life away. Yeah.
So another thing, did you know that there is an Indiana Jones reference in Phantom Menace in the background of a scene in Watto's shop?
Yeah, there's a little like hieroglyph.
That's right. R2-D2 are next to Indiana Jones. Yes. Where is it? Or he's next to Indiana Jones' Ark of the Covenant.
Sweet. No, I didn't know that either.
And then another one in the Phantom Menace, there are ET-like aliens in the Galactic Senate, a nod to George Lucas's friendship with Steven Spielberg.
I do remember noticing that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're very obvious. Yeah.
Yeah. I did not know that. And then the last one, which was interesting, was Mark Hamill apparently was in a car accident just before filming Empire Strikes Back, which is what required an explanation.
Motorcycle accident, I think, actually it was.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Explanation for his scars. So those are real scars that he has early in the movie.
Yeah, that's why they had to write in the Wampa.
Yeah. So, anyways, I thought those were.
Is that why they wrote in the Wampa? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so they had a reason for his face to be all scarred up.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So we got a Wampa paw to the face.
As one does on Hoth.
That's
naturally.
right.
Yeah.
All right. So now
when you're riding a tauntaun on the ice planet Hoth.
Here you go.
Those vicious Wampa strikes are gotta watch for those.
Now I want to just test your guys' knowledge of Star Wars. I mean, that was some interesting facts. So just for Nate, okay. So I don't know how many we'll get in here, but we'll see. So the first one, I think these are in ascending difficulty. So what color is Mace Windu's lightsaber?
Purple.
There you go.
There you go.
All right.
So you knew Mace Windu's lightsaber, but not Luke's. That's amazing.
Luke eventually uses a green.
Yeah.
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah.
I know. I'm just saying, it's not like I was completely, get out of here, shut up.
All right, second question. Which character's DNA was used as the basis for the Republic's clone army?
Jango
Fett. That's right. Okay.
Not to be confused with Django Unchained.
Yeah, that's right. Different.
It's like different multiverse. That's
all right. What were the final words spoken by Darth Vader?
You were always right?
Yeah, you were right.
Or you were right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure he says you were right. You were always right, doesn't he? Anyway.
Now I can't remember, but you were right. Close enough. That's the spirit of it.
There you go.
Who is the only non-Jedi in the original trilogy to use a lightsaber on screen?
The original trilogy?
Yep.
Han.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, when he slices and dices the tauntaun.
The tauntaun. Yep. That's right.
Yeah. Which
did
you guys ever watch Mythbusters?
I used to. Yeah.
Do you remember the Star Wars episode they did?
Yeah, I do.
Where they myth-busted whether you could actually survive
inside a
in
carcass,
like sub-zero temperatures inside the belly of a tauntaun.
Yeah, I think they said that you could.
Yeah, it was like myth, not
busted.
Not busted. Yeah,
George Lucas is boss. That's
okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So if you ever find yourself needing shelter with only a tauntaun, on Hoth,
it'll work.
You know what to do.
It'll work. All right. What specific kind of crystal powers a lightsaber?
Kyber
crystal. Who is the only character to appear in every single Star Wars movie from the original, prequel, and sequel trilogies?
C-3PO? Or sorry, R2-D2. I mean, sorry, not C-3PO. Is it R2-D2?
Yeah, I think it is R2-D2.
C-3PO.
Oh, it's C-3PO.
Ooh. I can't remember which
one is 3PO
right. Yeah, of course.
Not.
Yeah, because because Anakin makes him in the Phantom Menace, right?
Yep.
Yeah, but R2's in the Phantom Menace too.
Right.
So wait, which one would he? Is R2?
Which one was R2 not in it?
Is R2 in all? Are they both in all of them?
I think so.
Okay, we'll put an asterisk beside that one. We will come back to that. Okay, and the last one here. Not last one, second last one. What do the initials TIE, T-I-E, in TIE Fighter stand for?
Oh, twin ion engine.
Dang it, that's right.
Well done.
All right.
Well done.
And lastly, what was the original name of Star Wars before it changed to Star Wars?
Oh, I remember hearing this.
Yeah, me too, but I don't remember.
Okay.
I think isn't it something similar? Like it's like Galaxy Wars or something?
No, it's
Galaxy Quest.
The Adventures of Luke Starkiller.
Oh, I did know that it was Luke Starkiller. I actually don't know if I've ever heard that title.
That didn't ring a bell, so obviously I made that up.
Anyways, there we go. A little bit. And you know what? There were some that I came across that were way deeper cut than that. And I'd be surprised if most people would be able to know what they were, like really, really specific. But anyways, I thought some of these were pretty good. So
we should do an episode sometime. I know this isn't this episode, on the expanded universe and talk about like different eras, the Old Republic and stuff. Because that's like, that's actually one area why I love Star Wars so much is the ability to delve deep into past the stories, into the lore and stuff. But
and I think like all three of us, like the age where we are, like that's the era we actually grew up in.
Yeah.
Right. It was like after the original trilogy, before the prequel trilogy is when we were young kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so all there was the EU.
But what's crazy now is I was just talking to Chris, who one of our other associate pastors at the church, Nate, he's with you on the Rebel podcast. I was talking to him yesterday, and he was just lamenting over how Disney just threw all that away, though.
Yeah. I know. It's such a shame.
And I think we actually we're going to have Chris on because I think he's read more Star Wars fiction than anybody, either one of us would probably know by more orders of magnitude.
Yeah.
And so
the only actual fiction that I've read of Star Wars is the stuff that he's recommended to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't read any, I don't think I've read any of it.
Some good stuff like the Thrawn stuff. And
the Thrawn trilogy is great. Like I read a lot of the old like Rogue Squadron, X-Wing, some of like the Young Jedi stuff. So I've read a fair bit, but nothing. It doesn't hold a candle to what Chris has read. I've read nothing of the new era stuff. So like the High Republic, like all that. I haven't read any of it.
Would huge Star Wars fans, would they just ignore Disney decanonizing and say no, the other stuff 100%. Is legit?
Yeah, I mean, like 100%. I have a headcanon that ignores Disney, but like I can do both at the same time. Like I can still enjoy Skeleton Crew or the Mandalorian, while still just actually remembering awesome Luke Skywalker and Han and Leia's Jedi kids that aren't Kylo Ren. And
yeah.
Okay. Well, why don't we, before we get into our discussion about why the original trilogy is the best, why don't we just quickly hear a word from our sponsors?
Have you ever opened your internet browser in search of quality Christian books, only to find yourself wading through page after page of Joel Osteen books, Nerf guns, and tacky wall art? Thousand Generations Print Company is here to save the day. With a unique, family-owned approach, quick 24-hour processing, a commitment to providing heretic-free literature, and real human customer service, they focus on offering books that not only enlighten, but align with Orthodox Christian teachings. And, being conveniently located in Southern Ontario, there's no more need to sell your left kidney to pay for shipping within Canada. Visit at actuallychristianbooks.com. Again, that's actuallychristianbooks.com. And order yourself anything from Haunted Cosmos to Sir Battle-Lot and use promo code NERDOM, that's NERDOM, all caps, and receive 10% off your next order. Thousand Generations Print Company, books for building, books for battling, for 1,000 generations.
I'm Brent, and I'm rebuilding LEGO Star Wars to be the best display and play LEGO models. I enjoy the nostalgia of Star Wars by creating LEGO sets designed for adults but can be handed down to children. I've spent far too much time obsessed with LEGO and Star Wars, and God made me far too creative to let it all go to waste. So I created a YouTube channel, Boffman Bricks, to share what I'm building.
Well, welcome back, everybody. And all right, so it's now time for us to talk about why the original trilogy of Star Wars is the best in the franchise. And I know, Ben, like you and I, we're kind of riding a high right now with Star Wars Skeleton Crew. I'm now like watching through it with my kids. I've been building Star Wars Lego again with my kids. I'm honestly like really just loving Star Wars. Like it's great. It's been really nice to go through it. So I'm actually going to be watching through all of the movies again. So that's kind of like why we even thought about this episode. It's fresh in our minds. We're watching it. Nate, I know you, and like even with your kids, maybe is it Judah? Would you like, do your girls, do they enjoy Star Wars, or would it be more Judah?
No, they don't. Yeah, it's really just Judah. The girls tried. They gave me a good the old college try, but they're just not into laser swords nearly as much as Judah.
Well, and it's interesting because I mean, Haddon, yeah, he sees laser swords and he sees like guns, and he's just running around the house now, just loving it. But
shooting stormtroopers, obviously.
That's right, of course.
Yeah.
But yesterday we were watching through finishing up A New Hope. The girls were all just like sitting about a foot away from the TV, just like mesmerized and just like talking about, oh, that. And so, because I was thinking that, okay, they're just going to watch it. They know Daddy loves it. Like, we'll make, like, this is something that we want to like because Daddy likes it. But then they actually just seemed entirely enthralled with it. And just were now, even this morning, we slept in a little bit. The kids were up, got their own cereal and stuff, and we just hear them running around and they're pretending to be Leia and Luke and Han, and so that's
Nice.
That's just fantastic. So like, they, for whatever reason, our girls do seem to like it right now, which is kind of fun. So we'll see if that continues. But so I'm curious though, for you guys, I mean, we all love Star Wars now. I think we all did when we were younger, but do you guys remember when, like, do you have a time where you can remember, like, where you just fell in love with Star Wars? Was there a moment that you can look back on, or a season of life that you just look back on fondly, and that's when it kind of started for you?
Yeah. So I have two older brothers who were into Star Wars before me. So they're, just kind of was in the culture of our house growing up. But I specifically remember, I think I've maybe even mentioned this before on the show, but I remember when I was in kindergarten, going to school only every other day, on the off days that I was home, I watched Return of the Jedi or Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade every single day. So
Okay, that'll do it.
That was the time.
Yeah, that'll do it.
That was it. So I was actually in kindergarten as well, because I remember the every other day kindergarten, and we had my dad at the time was a youth pastor, and there was a youth in the church who gave me and my brother, I have a younger brother, and he gave us like a giant tub of G.I. Joes and a giant tub of Star Wars action figures. And when I say tub, I mean probably like 100 G.I. Joe figures and a bunch of vehicles, and then like probably 40 Star Wars characters.
And if you still had those in good shape today, that would be worth
seriously
tens of
Instead,
thousands of dollars.
we blew them up with firecrackers and whatever. But so my dad did a couple things. So I had to earn them. So it was like, instead of allowance for a while, every Saturday I'd get to pick out 2 G.I. Joes or whatever, and a couple Star Wars characters. But I didn't know Star Wars at the time. Now, my dad had seen it when he was a kid. He really liked it when he saw it in theaters and everything. So my dad was like, okay, you can start off every Saturday, if you did your chores or whatever, you get X number of G.I. Joes, and then we're going to watch the Star Wars. And once we've watched the whole trilogy, so it was like that Friday, I think we watched the first one. The next Friday we watched and we watched the original trilogy. And then once they were done, I got all the action figures to go with it. And so I just remember, I remember when Vader was like, "I am your father." I remember just being like jaw at the floor, and like my dad and mom just kind of smiling, looking at me, because I'm like processing. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I don't even remember the age specifically, but I remember my parents weren't fans of it, so we didn't own it. We didn't have the VHSs or anything, so I watched it first at a friend's house. It must have been kindergarten, grade 1, 2, somewhere in there, and then just absolutely enthralled with it. But the biggest thing I think I remember was the excitement around Phantom Menace, because there hadn't been a movie released in how many years? When was Return of the Jedi?
83 was Return of the Jedi, and
it was 99?
2001 or 99?
It was 99.
Was Phantom Menace.
And so then it was just like finally feeling like we could be part of a release of Star Wars. And like that was just like such an exciting thing. And like there was all the promotional stuff. Like they promoted the heck out of it. That was when I think Lego actually just took off like crazy, because it was the Star Wars license that, and I think Harry Potter were the big ones. So then for me, really loving Lego as a kid, I started getting Star Wars Lego sets, and Phantom Menace was like obviously not nowhere near my favorite, but it was just like being part of Star Wars.
When I was like 12 years old or whatever I was, it was pretty close to my favorite.
Oh, I had no problem with it
It was the
until
lightsaber fights, right?
Oh,
Like
man, yeah.
for the guy who every after I watched the original trilogy, every stick became a lightsaber.
Yeah.
If I ever found a straight stick, it was clearly a lightsaber, and I had to kill my brother with it.
We cut the blade off every hockey stick we owned and wrapped them with colored duct tape to make lightsabers. And
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so now when we think about all of these Star Wars movies, like we've already mentioned that we think that the original trilogy is the best. There's the prequel trilogy, there's the sequel trilogy, but the one that has stood the test of time has been the original trilogy. So as we were putting together our show notes for this episode, we put together a few points as to why we think that the original trilogy just exceeded anything that was put out by the other two. I think there's good moments. I think we would all agree in both the sequel and the prequel trilogies, but they just don't hold a candle. So the first one, and I think this gets to the biggest problem with the other two, is the first reason why the original trilogy stands out is that there was a clear narrative and a consistent direction. And I think, Nate?
Yeah, no, I just agree. I think that was actually the main problem, particularly with the newest trilogy, with the Rey trilogy, it was all over the map. Like there was a lot wrong with it, but it like the different directors even competing with one another about how they wanted to tell the story, right?
Yeah.
The nice thing about the original is that you have George Lucas, and it's before he's George Lucas, right? He's not worth $1 bazillion. He's just trying to tell a story. And so it's like his brainchild, and he's creating the universe, and he's creating the characters. And so I totally agree with that. It was just one guy who loved the characters that he wrote, loved the story that he wrote, loved the universe he created, and wanted to tell a good story.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing really got in his way.
Yeah.
Except budget.
Well, and it was just, it was...
For like, A New Hope.
Well, yeah, but even, so like in Return of the Jedi, you know, like on the moon of Endor, originally the way he wrote it, those were all supposed to be Wookiees, right? But they didn't have enough budget to make all of the Wookiee costumes, and so they went with Ewoks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's where, like, even just a compelling story is the original trilogy. Like the prequels, it was like, is this it was just like a political, like, especially as a kid, like it was not until later when I was an adult watching it where I even understood what the heck was going on in the whole thing, because it was all about like the Galactic Senate and all the stuff that was the Trade Federation.
Yeah, a funny move to make like the more like geared towards kids Star Wars movies
Way more political.
like just
like you kind of have to have
a
basic understanding of the Senate.
Yeah, but like at the time, if I'm honest, like I didn't care. I
didn't know what was going. Yeah,
I just didn't even pay attention to that part of it and was just waiting for the next
Darth Maul
sword fight. Yeah, pretty much.
Well, it was only like honestly not even until somewhat recently when I was going back and looking over and just like thinking about all the movies where I even realized how Palpatine and as Darth Sidious was like playing both sides and perpetuating the war.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, right, he was doing that. Like, I didn't even really think about the bigger pieces that were at play there, where it's like, oh, this is like he was wanting the war, obviously, so he could usher in the Empire. But I definitely as a kid, like I didn't pick up on that.
No, I didn't really get that. I will say though, probably the one thing that the Disney era Star Wars has done well or has improved upon or added to, I guess, Star Wars is they have filled in a lot of the gaps of the prequel trilogy with some like with Clone Wars and with Rebels and like with some of their animated
biggest
shows.
One being Rogue One fixing the giant glaring schematic failure of the Death Star.
Yeah, even Rogue One. Yeah, so like just some of that stuff Disney has actually done well, but then they just created a whole new set of problems with the sequel trilogy that has so many gaps that I don't think could ever be filled in.
I don't understand how they could have possibly greenlit that project without having just like unity or at least some understanding amongst who the different directors are going to be on the story. Like the fact that Rian Johnson just came in with The Last Jedi and just was able to trash so many things without talking, like, I don't know, maybe he did have conversations with Abrams who set the whole thing up, but it's like, to me, it's just utterly astonishing that for a franchise like that they just let him on a film by film basis, like write a new story. Like, would they have just not had a trilogy written out?
No, they definitely didn't. Like it's a known fact that they wrote them one at a time.
Yeah,
and because there's even like you can get the script for the third one.
Yeah,
that's what's it? Duel of the Fates. That they was like the temporary name for it. That was the one that was supposed to be made until they fired that guy and hired J.J.
Abrams
to do the third one. And it's way better. But
it is.
I would say the problem is Kathleen Kennedy, right? Every time you hear her talk, she's like, every new project, every new movie, every new show is like, this is like this person's interpretation of Star Wars, or it's Star Wars. But even with Skeleton Crew, like luckily they've picked something good where they're like, it's Amblin in space or Goonies in space. It's like, okay, and it's turned out okay. But every single thing they do, they're like, this is Star Wars, but from like this point of view, or Star Wars from this angle, or from this. It's just like, can we just do Star Wars? Like Star Wars is actually a thing. Like you don't have to reinterpret it with every new project. And I think that's where they've just gone totally off the rails in the Disney era.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I do agree that I think the original trilogy, it had a clear narrative, it had consistent vision, consistent direction, and that's one of the things that made it as a unit so good. And that's why you could have that moment at the end of The Empire Strikes Back that like left everybody. Like, can you imagine just having to wait to watch, The Return of the Jedi, after, waiting for it with like when the movie ends at like, we know you can just pop in the third one, but man, when you went to the theater and watched Empire Strikes Back, that's one of those movies that ends and everybody's kind of going like, what on earth just happened? But the reason they could do that is because it was one consistent unit.
Yeah. And George Lucas likes to revise history in the sense of like telling everybody that he had this whole thing planned and the prequels and Anakin, and like he definitely didn't.
No.
But it was one guy. It was still one guy with his storytelling. Like it wasn't 6 different people writing 6 different stories hoping that they mesh and
right.
And
so in all honesty, like I don't want to rehash things we've said in previous episodes, but like, when it's a Disney team of writers, you have policies and DEI stuff. You have just like company policies. Like George Lucas, it was just his thing. It was this Star Wars was the story that, was birthed in his heart and like he wanted to tell the world.
Literally created a production company called Lucasfilm to make Star Wars
story.
Movies. Yeah. Like exclusively.
Yeah. The one thing I find really impressive with it is how, in so many sequels, there's something about it that just doesn't feel quite the same. Like it seems like it's an obvious sequel to a movie and it just doesn't land quite the same, whether it's the cinematography, the acting, and what made like Lord of the Rings so good and why I think that's why they filmed it all in one go, is to try to have that clear, like this is just one really big story. It doesn't feel any different. It all feels, The Hobbit is a whole other thing, but even in this one, like you're talking about movies that was like, what was it, 77 to 83?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all 3 years apart, 77, 80.
Yeah, and they didn't film it at once. And so, but yet all of them, like they still feel the same. Like they still have the same tone. They have the same writing. Like the humor is good. That's kind of something we'll get to in a little bit, but it's like, it doesn't feel radically different between movie to movie. It just feels like Star Wars.
Yeah.
Which I think is an impressive thing for... Yeah, when you have different directors, but you still had that grand visionary because Lucas produced the whole thing, so he was still the showrunner. He had final say, and I think
he didn't write or direct after A New Hope.
Yeah, I think
Right.
But he was still the producer, the final say,
Yeah. And I think that was something that I remember it was quite a few years ago. Somebody shared a YouTube video, and if I can find it, I'll show it throw it in the show notes. But it was a guy who it was like a 4-hour video on the problems with the prequel trilogy. So this was before the sequel trilogy even came out. And one of the things that the guy said in it was, in the original trilogy, Lucas actually wasn't the primary like writer.
Yeah.
And then he took on the writing responsibilities more heavily in the prequels.
And the dialogue shows it.
Yes. Yeah. Because it's like, that's one of the big flaws with the original. It's like the writing's just not very good. I mean, the acting of some of those scenes weren't very good either. Right. Like even Anakin, where it's like, what is he like? I don't like sand.
Yeah.
That's
I
like
hate sand.
Right. Like one of the famous
Gets
things.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just wasn't very good. And so, I mean, there's a difference between being the great writer and being the grand visionary. And it just seemed like in the prequel, he overstepped wanting, and who knows what his motivations were for that. But anyways, yeah, I think that's why we would all agree that the lack of cohesion was one of the big problems with the other ones. So the second point we have here, why the original trilogy is better, is it had strong characters and strong character development.
Yep. I mean, you look at, I think Han is probably the best example of that from movie to movie in the original trilogy, right? You just have this sort of roguish space piratey type of guy who's just in it for himself, who does the right thing at the end, and then is actually, and then he gets to really shine in Empire Strikes Back, and gets frozen in carbonite, and then he comes back in Return of the Jedi and is just like full on General Solo, like general of the rebellion, doing his thing. And so you see that, and then but like you also see it with Luke, who's just this little farm boy, and like it's actually his hero's journey, right? And like I think Luke's is a little bit, if there's one to complain about, I guess maybe it might be actually Luke's a little bit, just that it is maybe a little fast forwarded in terms of he's just like little farm boy to awesome Jedi, maybe a little too quickly, but you still get it. Like,
but then there's Rey.
Well, that's
so,
yeah. You compare that to Rey, who just like apparently just born girl boss and just figured out the Force on her own, right?
Like at least he met Yoda. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, it's like generally speaking, again, you got to put these movies into context, which is, this isn't none of these were ever intended to win like best drama at the Oscars,
right?
Like these are a fun adventure with laser swords and space wizards, and so like to also have like good enough characters and character development, good enough writing, good enough cinematography, like that's all it needs.
Yeah. And I think that there is like along with they're good characters. You said they develop well. There's more depth to them, I would at least argue, than your average kind of space adventure. And there's also good like interactions, right? So you have the Chewie and Han relationship. You have, I think, a whole lot of just very enjoyable, very entertaining, witty banter between Leia and Han. And you have the sort of rivalry between Luke and Han, and yet it's sort of like an older brother, younger brother thing with, Obi-Wan being the father figure. And you have the complicated relationship with Vader that plays itself out throughout the trilogy. It's the interaction between
R2 and 3PO.
Yeah.
Right? Even who else could have had these two little robots where one of them is just beeps and effete like British dude, and the other one just beeps and boops, and then they're like beloved. It's just like
so
that
true.
in itself is remarkable.
Well, and the thing is like, and this is one thing, like even in showing our kids these shows, it'd be interesting, as because my kids haven't seen any of the like prequels or anything else. So it'd be interesting as things go, like, does everybody hate Jar Jar as much as I do? And I think the answer is actually yes. Like the thing that the prequels and the sequels didn't get was having those beloved sort of droid characters that are just sort of, they're kind of silly, but they fit, and everybody loves them. They're beloved characters, and I think that's what they're trying to do, is make
except for
Jar
Han.
Jar.
Han really doesn't like C-3PO.
True.
Yeah.
But like I just think like they tried to do that with other characters and it just didn't work. So then the question is, well, why didn't it work? And it's just because the characters in the original were better. And the reason they brought them all back, even though they ruined them further, was because they recognized it doesn't work with our new characters. We need the old ones back.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the big glaring like character development things from the prequels is just how ridiculous it was for Anakin to have gone from, boy wonderkin Jedi to genocidal child murderer. And it just kind of happens just
in 5 seconds. Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, you did that real quick, right? And even even characters like Finn in the sequels, where it's like he's kind of set up as being one of the main guys, but by the end of it, it's kind of like a secondary character. Like, who are you? Like, he was
he didn't even need to be in the third one.
No, he didn't. And that's where, like, I didn't mind him as a character. I thought the whole idea was fine. Like, I didn't think he was a bad character. He's certainly not Rose, in terms of, and that's where, like, getting into like the supporting characters, right? Like, that's where the original, like you can name how many of those characters that were actually enjoyable, that you, when they're on screen, it wasn't like, can you just be done here? Versus
think of Boba Fett. Like Boba Fett, think of how infamous he is. Look at how like iconic Boba Fett is, and he played such a minor role in the original.
He has like 8 total minutes of screen time and 3 lines.
Like everybody like universally loves Boba Fett, right?
Yeah.
Even Lando, it's interesting, like, because you actually hate Lando, right, in Empire, but there's depth enough there as well that you kind of understand his struggle and his plight. And
I don't even hate Lando in Empire. Like, I totally get Lando's motivations in Empire. He's like, whatever, I'll give up Han, this like scoundrel who double crossed me in my past to save my whole city.
Right.
Like, that's a legit motivation. And then he realizes that he's getting swindled and screwed over, and he helps everybody out. Like, I actually think that's a great arc, and I actually love the character of Lando, and he's played well. Like, I just love
that's before you knew that he was an androgynous playboy who likes to
I know and then droids, and then they brought him back for 7 seconds in the sequel trilogy too, and just
what you bring up
the moment where he like, it's like, what fleet is that? What army? Is like, that's not a fleet. That's just people. It's like Lando. There's like the worst line.
So the Lando Han stuff makes me think of some of the like the quotes from like the lines, like the famous lines from Star Wars movies. Like, we obviously have "May the Force be with you," and then Han with like, "I know, I love you, I know." Like, what a beautiful like iconic line right there. But then I just have a couple other here. I am your father. Like.
Yeah, obviously.
But is there anything like, does anything stand out to you guys from the prequel or the sequel? Like, the only one is the silly.
I was going to say most of the ones that stand out are like the ones that you make fun of, not
like Misa Jar Jar Binks.
Misa called Jar Jar Binks. Great.
Yeah, so it's like they're memorable.
There is the most iconic one from any of the prequels is Obi-Wan jumping down to greet Grievous. Hello there.
Yeah, that's but again, that's because he says it in the original trilogy.
Yes, that's true.
Right, like that's why it's iconic, is like, oh, it's Obi-Wan, so it's not even unique to the prequels. But yeah, no, I agree. Like, I don't know what you'd rank as your like top 10 quotes.
I don't think so, Dooku. In the most Shaft voice ever.
Yeah.
Mace Windu is like, the fact that they cast Samuel L. Jackson is one of the things I hate most.
I know. Yeah, the fact that he's in a Star Wars movie is just utterly ridiculous.
It's just Shaft in space and a robe.
Yeah. All right. Well, this kind of leads into our fourth reason why the original trilogy is better, and that is iconic villains. When you think of Star Wars, you just think of Darth Vader, and then next to that, the Emperor. But when you go to even I think
Tarkin,
Tarkin
in A New Hope was a really cool, just like not a physical threat in any way whatsoever, but just you knew he had all the power and held all the cards, and was a pretty menacing threat, and was acted really well.
Well, because then you have Hux in the sequel trilogy, and he's just just yells. It's like, that doesn't make you scary, man. And then but like you don't have anything like in the sequels. Like, what do you have? You have Kylo Ren, who's just like this whiny little millennial
which is too bad, because Kylo Ren, when I first watched Force Awakens and Kylo Ren first shows up on the planet and stops the bolt, and I had high hopes. I was like, this looks cool. Yeah, not so much.
And there was even in the second one, in Last Jedi, I thought Adam Driver was the one and only halfway saving grace of that movie. But again, he's like not even like a legit villain, because you're like,
is he good? Is he bad?
Good, sort of on our side, not really. I don't know. But yeah,
I was really disappointed they took his mask off, because I thought it would have just been way cooler for him to just not be as human as they made
honestly,
him out
to be as goofy looking a dude as Adam Driver is, when he takes that mask off and all that hair. And
I know.
Like, I remember the moment. Just
so anticlimactic.
Yeah, she'd be like, really?
Well, and I think one of the biggest missed opportunities that I thought they were going to tee up, and I was expecting it to be really cool, was the Knights of Ren.
Yeah, seriously.
And like they made that sound like, oh wow, this like elite group of rogue Jedi, now Sith guy. It's like, that's kind of cool. Like, and that was just like what a passing.
They actually were literally nothing. Like, I don't know. I don't even think they existed.
They showed up only to fight Kylo himself at the very end when he was going to help.
For no particular reason.
For no reason. Yeah. No explanation as to why they were even there, really.
Yeah, or who they are, or why they exist, or why they have the same name as Kylo Ren, or like...
Yeah.
I will say, as we're talking about iconic villains, like, and Jordan, like, I imagine Haddon, your boy, is in a similar space. But Ben, I'd be interested in your thought too, with all the boys you have. Like, Judah loves Darth Vader and stormtroopers more than anybody else in Star Wars, really. Like, young boys are just attracted. Like, there's even an aesthetic to the villains in Star Wars, like the stormtrooper outfits and Vader. Obviously, I think the aesthetic of the villains even plays into it, because the stormtrooper themselves, even though they can't hit anything with their lasers and all that, but like it's just a great aesthetic. They're great villains.
Totally. Yeah.
The faceless,
best looking, most menacing. Like Vader might be my number one movie villain. Probably is. Probably just number one movie villain of all time.
Yeah, he's just so scary, right? And scary in like a not grotesque, not like demonic. He's just an imposing, scary, powerful, foreboding, villain.
Like, the thing that it was like missing from the original one is that, like, did they really even develop out who the main villain was? Like, yes, it was like Palpatine was doing his thing.
Yeah.
Like, Darth Sidious was like there in the shadows. You kind of see him, but he was always hooded, like not a lot.
Count Dooku, you mean in the
prequels? Sorry, in the prequels.
Sorry,
in the prequels. Yeah. And then it's just like, and then Count Dooku just showed up, but wasn't really.
Well, like, they really didn't, right? Like, the main villain in that one is the Trade Federation.
The Viceroy.
The Viceroy, right? Like, and it's just like, because he's doing what he's doing because he's threatened by Sidious. But and that's the thing. It's just like so anticlimactic, because you know who Sidious, like, you know who that cloaked, hooded, faceless figure is.
Yeah.
So it took a little bit of the punch out of that for sure.
Yeah. And I don't know, the whole Snoke stuff in the sequels as well, where all of a sudden it's just like, oh, you're just gone. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, again, cool setup. Actually, like a menacing villain kind of guy who, right? Because that was what was kind of cool about Tarkin in A New Hope, was that you're like, oh man, Darth Vader, and then you see Tarkin, and Tarkin's like telling this dude what to do.
Yeah.
Like this guy must be important. And then it's kind of, you kind of got that vibe a little bit in Force Awakens. You're like, oh, Kylo Ren, cool, dark side Force villain. And then you got this Snoke guy who's like just treating him like a child. And you're like, oh man, like this guy must be real important. And you're just like, oh no, he's actually nothing.
Well, and that I think brings into one of the like problems just with that in like J.J. Abrams having to come in and just like fix so many of those problems. It's just like, then they bring back Palpatine and it's like, wait, what? Like, I don't even actually fully understand how they explain that. Maybe I just haven't watched those movies enough, but like, does anybody, like, it's just kind of like, well, he's here now. Like, was that ever actually really explained?
Meriadoc Brandybuck told us how.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, just that it was, what did he say? Just like Sith magic or something? We're like,
Sith magic, that's
okay.
right.
I guess that's what it was.
Yeah.
It's just such a shame how it's like, that's what they had to resolve to, was just, oh yeah, he's here. Don't ask questions.
Yeah, and I mean they drew from like the cloning and stuff that had been a big part of the whole thing, but it's just I agree. I think it was just a cheap way out because
again, if you watch Bad Batch, they actually, again, like I said earlier, that's one of the things Disney has tried to do, is use their other shows to fill in gaps and stuff. And so the Bad Batch actually is a pretty decent show, animated show, and it does fill in some of those Palpatine gaps. But
okay.
They're even trying to do that with Mandalorian, right? Like Mandalorian.
Yeah, that's going in the same direction. Yeah.
How many seasons is Mandalorian at? Is it 3?
3, and then the next, it'll conclude with the movie that comes out in 2026.
Okay. Did you watch the 3rd season, Ben?
Yeah, it wasn't great.
Yeah.
It wasn't great, but Mandalorian's still probably the best thing Star Wars has going.
Oh yeah, it's their cash cow for sure, right? For Disney. That's why they're.
But season 1 and season 2 were actually great.
Yeah,
they were. Yeah, season 1 was fantastic. Season 2 was like good,
pretty good. Season
3 was not as good.
Agreed.
Yeah, I didn't have Disney at the time, so I entirely missed out on season 3. So I need to finish. I'm about halfway through Andor because I heard that. So far I've enjoyed it.
Did you see the announcement of what they spent on Andor?
It's like $300 million or something, or
between the 2 seasons, it's either just shy or just over $500 million. Which is just for like not even a movie, like for a streaming show. Like that's nuts.
Yeah, because you're not getting box office tickets to cover that. Like you're hoping that leads to increase in
subscriptions. Yeah, it's crazy to me.
Especially now that they have the ad-free tier, which is what I pay for, because I want to give them the least amount of money possible. So it's like, what, $6?
Yeah.
Like I'm guessing more and more people are doing that as well, because I actually don't find
there's a new bundle out now apparently where you can get you can bundle Prime, Netflix, and Disney. It's the lowest tier on each one, but it's
really
it's like I want to say $17.99 for the 3.
Is this like legal though?
No, like I just saw it. I was watching the World Juniors last night and the commercial came on, so I'm like, I got to look into that. I think it was commercial.
Does your uncle's brother's nephew come and get up on my roof?
You send me your SIN number, and oh boy.
All right. Next reason why the original trilogy is better: the use of practical effects and iconic designs. Ben, you and I were talking about this in our recent Skeleton Crew episode, because they brought back this stop motion animator in the show from Return of the Jedi, and it was like so obviously stop motion that we both noticed it, loved it. And even with like animatronics being used by Neil for one of the characters, that is the stuff to me that makes the original Star Wars so good. Because I remember watching the Clone Wars, to me was the most egregious of any Star Wars property, because I think the entire thing was largely filmed on a green screen.
Attack of the Clones.
Attack of the Clones. Sorry, Attack of the Clones. Sorry. Yeah, Attack of the Clones. And it was so obviously terrible And
to the point where I've heard Ewan McGregor say that when he finished filming the prequel trilogy, he like wanted nothing to do with Star Wars. He hated it because he was just like literally every day was just standing in a big blue room and talking to people that don't exist.
Yeah.
And which makes you look back on his performance and you're just like, wow, like you nailed it, because it could not have been easy.
He was the only good actor in those prequels.
Yeah. That poor kid who played Anakin was just awful.
Yeah.
Again, like maybe just the writing was terrible for Hayden Christensen, but it was like I didn't like him.
He was
it was both ends. Yeah. But I mean, like
Natalie Portman's a good actress. Hayden Christensen's a good actor, but it was just neither of them did well. They weren't good in that.
Yeah. If you like when you talk about the practical effects and the costumes, the stop animation, all that, like it just gives a weight to the scenery, to the other characters, to the people in the background that, you know, don't even speak. Like it just makes you feel like this is an actual place and not just a, you know, video game.
Think about how, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Finish your thought, Ben.
No, I mean that's go ahead.
Well, think about just juxtapose Hoth versus the like salt planet that they're at the end of the Last Jedi. So like you think about how much technology and effects and everything have changed between those two, and yet Hoth is a far more believable set, believable surroundings. Yeah. And obviously they're made to look very similar, and the one's salt, the one's snow. I get that. But like Hoth is far more of a, like, you believe you're immersed in that world. You believe
feel like
that
you
Hoth
could touch it. You could sit in one of those snow speeders. You could, 100%. And like I do have a bit of sympathy in the sense of like George Lucas. Part of the reason he made Star Wars, like the original trilogy, like when he made the original trilogy, all the technology that he used, he basically invented on the spot.
Yeah.
And then every movie after that started using that technology. And then he did the same thing with the prequels. So like part of his motivation for actually going back and doing the prequels was he was like, I really want to reinvent the wheel and do this CGI stuff. Like there's no, like George Lucas and Lucasfilm and Skywalker Sound, like they basically invented CGI. Like we don't have modern films as we know it without episodes 1, 2, and 3. It's like I have a little bit of sympathy in the fact that it's like it's just George playing around with all these new tools that he wanted to invent and use the excuse of making these movies to invent them. But they're just so vastly inferior to the practical effects. Yeah.
Well, and because like they would have used like models for Millennium Falcon, they would have used models
100%,
for all the like the X-Wings, TIE fighters, and like just literally
Lego, I think, actually, Jordan.
Yeah, that's right. But and like, because is there any really iconic stuff that comes out of like, to me, when I think of the original trilogy, or sorry, the prequel trilogy, it's like Annie's pod was kind of like a thing that I really loved. So like the whole pod racing thing was I think a cool addition. From the sequel trilogy, were there any of the ships that were particularly, like there's Kylo Ren's ship, but was that any better than Vader's ship that he had? The Star Destroyer, or whatever it was called in the sequels, was just
bigger Star Destroyer.
Yeah, it's just like
a bigger Death Star, a bigger Star Destroyer,
a black X-Wing.
Yeah. So it's just like nothing really new came from it. They just borrowed from.
The only thing I can think of, if I'm trying to be kind, is like the rolling animation on BB-8 was pretty cool. That was like a cool touch. But I agree. I don't think that there was anything that like they made that was iconic. Whereas, like you said, Star Wars paved the way for sci-fi movies for the next generation, right?
Yeah. Do you guys think the Millennium?
Just movies, period. Like the technology that they like I say, they literally invented this technology to make these movies.
Yeah.
And then every movie basically in existence after that has borrowed it and used it also.
It's sort of like
for better or for worse, but
right. Yeah.
Would the Millennium Falcon be the most famous ship, like spaceship, ever? Do you think more than the
That or the Enterprise?
The Enterprise? What would you guys think is the most iconic?
I think the Falcon would, if you put it to a just general poll, I think the Falcon would win.
Yeah.
But it's probably close. Like those are probably the two, I guess.
Yeah. I'm just happy that they're bringing back.
Problem is there's like 15 different Enterprises too.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. Yeah. There's one Falcon. Yeah. But I like that they're bringing back these animatronics, bringing back stop motion. Like,
and it's kind of the best of both worlds too. Like that crab in Skeleton Crew, the big giant crab, and even Neil's face. Like, you know that like they're obviously touching those up with CGI.
Oh yeah, and that's fine.
But but you get the like real weightiness of the practical effect first, and then you just go back and you sort of airbrush it with the CGI. But if you just green screen it from the start, it's just a weird, uncanny, off feel.
Yeah, yeah. Like the biggest thing was Neil in Skeleton Crew, and just seeing that we were kind of looking at it's like that looks like it's a real thing. It looks like it's really his like trunk is really moving, and then we find out that it's actually how many guys, Ben? It was like
it's like a half a dozen. There's like the kid in the mask, and then there's somebody remote control on the trunk, somebody on the ears, somebody on the eyes. Like
it's just fantastic. And I mean, kudos to Abrams. Like he did that with Force Awakens again as well, right? He brought in more of that, and that's what like made it feel different than the prequel trilogy. So kudos to him, even though he pretty much just ripped off A New Hope and just in many ways the whole storyline, but still, like there were things there that I think were good and redeemable. All right, second last point. The original trilogy had a more balanced tone, just meaning more a good use of both drama and humor, appropriate uses of the two, not feeling overly contrived and forced. And I think that was, as I'm watching through New Hope right now, and just, it's the banter between 3PO and R2-D2. It's Han and Leia. It's Leia and like calling Chewie a carpet or something like. I forget the exact
carpet,
big walking
right? And it's just like that's funny. That's
calling
right?
Han scruffy looking nerf herder. Like,
the nerfer.
Right, and it's even now like moments that weren't necessarily meant to be funny, but now we
looking.
What is it like when he says when Luke's like, oh, I'm just gonna go get his power converters, and like now I just laugh every time. I was
gonna go to Tashi Station to pick up some power converters,
right? And it's like, it wasn't meant to be funny, but now I just laugh because it's such a iconic kind of humorous thing there. But like even in they tried with Luke in would it have been Return of the Jedi when he just like tosses his lightsaber, he's like drinking the weird alien cow milk or whatever that is. It's like
Last Jedi.
Last Jedi.
Yeah.
What did I say?
Return of the Jedi.
Sorry, Last Jedi. Yeah, and he's like drinking the weird
it's
whatever
terrible.
that thing.
Like that was just
unnecessary. Like, and this is the thing. Star Wars always had this. Like, there was the scene with Obi-Wan and Luke going through the bar, right? And there's all the weird kind of, and there's Jabba's lair where there's the weird aliens and stuff like that. But it was never like intentionally gross.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas
the only thing. So we watched Return of the Jedi just a few days ago with the kids, and I fast forwarded some Jabba stuff for the littler ones. Like that was a little gross, but
no, I agree.
Nothing like
the strangulation scene and some of that stuff,
and just Leia in her stupid gold bikini.
Yeah.
But nothing like Luke drinking milk from the teat of a space sea cow. Like just the dumbest thing.
Yeah.
But
I definitely agree, and I think that the prequels and the sequels tried to recapture that, and I think the fact that so many critics will knock the banter, the writing, the dialogue is partially because I think they were trying to recreate something that the actors just didn't have the same chemistry as they did in the original. Like I think that when you go back, it's not like the writing in the original trilogy was fantastic dialogue. It was just the chemistry between the actors was good. What they tried to make funny was actually funny. What they tried to make serious was actually serious. They just hit it wasn't tone deaf like the other ones.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it would be pretty hard for the Padme and Anakin chemistry to be the same as Han and Leia, considering the actor like Harrison Ford and
Carrie
remind me
Fisher.
her name. Carrie Fisher, thank you. Were actually having an affair during the filming of the movies. And so it's like, well, no wonder they had some actual chemistry because they were actually
Don't ruin it. Don't ruin it.
But like
Only during the first one.
was it just the first one?
Pretty sure it was only during A
okay.
New Hope. Yeah. When she was like 19 and he was 30 or whatever.
35. He wasn't even originally supposed to get the part, right?
It was
Lucas
Burt Reynolds.
Yeah.
And then he was
Lucas brought him in just to help with the reading.
He was Burt Reynolds was contractually obligated to Magnum PI, so he couldn't go do Han Solo.
I think I saw that other Stallone interviewed for it or auditioned for it, and Al Pacino was another one.
I can't see an Italian Han Solo.
Seriously.
No, it's one of those things where it's like
Goodfellas meets.
Yeah.
Can you imagine anybody being Han Solo though at this point?
No, that's no.
Right? So, okay. And we also need to mention Jar Jar Binks falling flat. That was an attempt at humor and just did not work.
I do have to give credit to George for just doubling and tripling down and making Jar Jar like such an important key figure in the galactic civil war of like being
and you can actually blame it all on him at the end of the day. Yeah.
Being the guy that gives Palpatine emergency powers. Like that's kind of great actually.
Well, there was a fun theory that I saw somebody wrote or
Count Jar Jar.
Like, he's actually like a Sith Lord. Yeah. Which that would be amazing.
It's actually a pretty good video too. Like the person did a lot of work for it, where it shows like there are certain things that he does where you're just like, oh my word.
Nobody could be that dumb. Like it had to have been on purpose. Yeah.
All right. And the last reason why the original trilogy is better is that there was real emotional weight and stakes. Things actually, like when you think of a Luke confronting Vader in Empire Strikes Back, like that was like a real emotionally heavy, challenging thing versus something like Snoke's sudden and anticlimactic death. It was just kind of like, wait, what? Like,
I think there was none of that in the sequel trilogy. The prequel trilogy, like, could have, except it was a prequel, so you knew everything. Right? Like there was no. You're like, oh, I wonder if Obi-Wan's actually going to be able to defeat Anakin and chop his arms and legs off. Like, well,
do you guys know why? And I feel like I should know this, but do you know why he started at 4? Because when it released, it was episode 4, was it not? Like even in theaters with posters and everything?
George likes to rewrite history. Like he did not. That was just a fun way to like say we're in the middle of this story.
Yeah. Okay. Because the story starts like in media res, right? Like it's like you already have the ship getting boarded
but he'll like if you like he'll go back and tell you that he had this all planned out and like he just so clearly did not.
Yeah. He might have had an idea, but it wasn't like meant to ever go back. It was just an idea of the world and
I think that's just like
this actually brings up, and maybe this is a point that maybe we'll make after we remind ourselves of all the movies with the fun thing that we're going to do to finish off this episode. But it kind of does make you wonder about the proper viewing order. Like we all have kids now, and I put some thought into whether or not I would show them, a Phantom Menace first and work my way through the movies that way. And the only reason I gave it actual consideration, and I do actually think you should start at A New Hope and then go back and watch the prequels, but the only reason I really thought that the Phantom Menace might be a good starting point is because I think the turn to Vader would mean so much more when you don't already know that it's Vader.
Right.
And I think that would be a huge moment.
I don't mind the order. I don't mind the showing order of starting at 1 if I would be afraid that it would turn them off of Star
Right.
Wars. You know what I mean? Like it would,
Yeah.
because I just feel like showing 4 first, you have a better chance at making someone
Winning
a
them.
fan of Star Wars. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, it's interesting though, like Melissa, when we got married, she had never watched it. And so like it was required
filming
watching
too.
at that point. And we watched the first one and she didn't really say much throughout. We just, she like actually watched it.
Like
and,
A New Hope?
yeah, New Hope.
Yeah.
And after she was like, are you like, was that actually it? I was like, well, yeah, like she was like, are you joking? She did not like it at all.
Neither
Like,
does Colleen.
Yeah, like she thought, she was like, that looked awful. Like that wasn't actually very good. And so it just it does make you wonder how much is our just like rose tinted glasses
No,
from
it
when we
is
were
like
younger.
this is Star Wars is a thing that is meant to be consumed first as a
kid.
child.
I agree.
Agreed.
Yep.
And
Yep.
like you don't go like A New Hope is not a movie designed to win an adult for the first, like as
Correct.
as the first time it's being consumed.
Yeah.
So it
Especially
is
not a
hard. It is
female
hard.
adult.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you have it. That is why we think the original Star Wars is better. So if you agree or disagree, let us know in the comments. We would love to hear your thoughts. Now, before we wrap up the episode, we're wanting to do, as only seems appropriate, a ranking of the Star Wars movies. We're only doing the movies, and we are including in them not just the trilogy, but the 2 standalone films, Rogue One and Solo, that came out. We're going to put these in ascending order, but probably start with the worst, work our way up. Would you guys say? Well, is that how you guys want to do it that way? Or do you want to start with the best and work our way down?
I'm fine with whatever you want to do.
Yeah, let's start let's start with the top and work our way down. I think it'd be easier just to work my way. I kind of thought about this, but there's a few that we're going to talk about and get a consensus on here, right?
Okay.
I think it'd be easier
so
at the top for consensus.
So this is an episode where you might want to go check it out on YouTube. We're going to have a visualization showing how we're organizing the videos. So starting with our number 1, and boys, we want to try to come to an agreement. So this is going to be the Reforming Nerdom consensus on what we think. And I'm curious, I'm guessing most of ours are going to probably be aligned anyways, but I'm curious. So we might have to concede to the majority at some point. So what would you guys say is the best Star Wars movie made?
Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, there's
All
only
right.
one answer
So
to that.
I'm just going to go ahead and do that because that's an easy one. All right.
Yeah.
I totally agree. That wasn't even a question for me. Number 2.
I honestly, I think from here on out, we could definitely have some disagreement.
Okay.
I have got a New Hope for my number 2.
I do as well.
Okay, see, I would have put Return of the Jedi, but they were close.
Okay. So Nate, are you okay conceding to the
For sure.
majority?
For sure.
All right. So I would say New Hope as well. And then my third was Return of the Jedi. Then
That's fair. I would actually, and this might shock you a little bit, I would put Rogue One as my number
that
3.
high. Okay. That's
So-
my.
So
okay.
I'm right with you. I'd put Rogue. So let's put.
But I'm totally Return of the Jedi is my number 4, so I'm totally fine.
And Rogue
with it
One is
being
my
in the
number
number
4.
3
So
slot.
I'm okay either way as well.
Yeah, so I would definitely say let's put Return of the Jedi at number 3 because that was my number 2. But Rogue One would be my number 4. I
would
think
agree.
Rogue One was fantastic.
Yeah.
We could do a whole episode on why like that actually captured Star
Yeah.
Wars.
Why it worked. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Okay.
it was
So we got Empire, A New Hope, and then Return of the Jedi. So we just got OT, original trilogy 1, 2, 3.
done out of the way. Now we're at number 5. What do you guys have as your 5th?
So I was between A Phantom Menace and Revenge of the Sith.
Okay.
And I think I'd probably have to go with Revenge of the Sith but that Revenge of
what
the
I have.
Sith would be my number 5.
That's what I have.
me. That's me as well.
All right.
Okay.
Yep. Oh wait, that's not the right one. Where was it? These things are not no, that's I think that right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan and Anakin fighting.
That's right.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I thought out of the trilogy, that was like I enjoyed that movie the most, and like epic. I
Because
mean,
the stakes were high, even though we kind of knew the outcome. The stakes were so high. There was a lot going on.
Well,
You
and you
saw the
see-
turn.
and like the real, I'd say like Ewan McGregor's at the very end when it's like you were the chosen one. Like the actual raw emotion of that, and I think he did that very well, even though he was likely looking at nothing, was incredibly impressive.
Well, and I would say that Anakin is actually better at being a Sith than he is at being
a just
Jedi.
angry, emotional. Yeah.
Okay, so Revenge of the Sith, that is 3, and then what would you guys put as number 6?
I'd put a Phantom Menace, I think.
I would as well.
I think I would. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. That's where I had it. Okay. Number 7.
So so for my like 7, 8 slot, I'm not sure exactly where, but I would have either. Well, you know what I think we should actually do?
Go back,
I think
go down
we
to the
should
bottom.
go to the bottom now.
Yeah,
I think we should go to the bottom.
Okay.
Because clearly The Last Jedi is the worst movie ever made.
All right.
Yeah. Sorry, The Last Jedi. I thought you said Rise. I was thinking Rise of Skywalker, but no, it's The Last Jedi, the second one.
Yeah,
It's just
Last
the
Jedi
worst.
is the second last in the sequel trilogy.
So,
Worst one.
Yeah, Last Jedi, and then it's Rise of Skywalker for me is the next worst.
Yep. I would agree. Okay, and so now
then,
we
and
have.
then here's where I'm like, I don't know. So what we have Attack of the Clones and
Force
Solo
Awakens and Force Awakens.
Force Awakens.
Yeah.
I would actually put Attack of the Clones as the worst of those 3.
I agree. I actually agree.
I can't stand that movie, but it's just that it's not as bad as the other ones.
Yeah. The only good thing in that movie, well, I shouldn't say the only good thing in that movie. I think that the Dooku and Yoda actually handling a lightsaber was the only redeeming thing in that movie.
Yep.
Yeah.
The whole scene in the beginning with like Anakin and Padme up in like the hotel thing and that whole flying around in just what was such a ridiculous, obvious CG, like
high-speed chase
on Coruscant was terrible.
Awful.
Yeah.
Oh, just brutal.
Again, Ewan McGregor almost brings it out of the ashes on his own. And then when Yoda pulls out his lightsaber, I think we all had a moment where we're like, oh, finally.
Yeah.
So, but it was a terrible
then he's like
movie.
jumping around like a little monkey thing, and it just
it was like honestly at the time I was like, oh, this is so sweet, Yoda finally. But looking back, I'm like, it's even that is also kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay. So the last 2 that we have to rank would be The Force Awakens and Solo.
Honestly, they're a toss up for me. I don't know what I would put ahead of the other one. I don't hate the Solo movie as much as most people, I think, but
I don't either, actually. I didn't hate it. I'd probably go Solo and then Force Awakens, but I could be convinced either way. Force Awakens wasn't as terrible as the rest of the trilogy. It had its moments, but I thought, like we talked about, Adam Driver taking his helmet off and looking like a buffoon. It had like Han Solo as the degenerate dad, but it did have it had its moments.
I think a big part for me why I enjoyed it at the theater because it was like where they're now on the Falcon and Han shows up. Like there was actual audience cheering, which was just like a lot of fun. So even though the movie in hindsight wasn't amazing, for me it was realizing after and thinking and talking about it more that then I became more negative towards it. But in the moment watching it, it was like, I actually enjoy this movie. I didn't have an issue with it.
The 2 subsequent movies bring that one down.
Yes.
Right?
Agreed.
Like were those better, The Force Awakens would be looked upon as a lot better than it was.
And there were a few like kind of iconic moments where like when Kylo Ren is stalking Rey in the forest outside of Yaz's temple and stuff like that. It had its moments, and you still didn't know. Like I remember wondering for myself too, like is there going to be like, is Finn going to end up using the Force when he pulls up the lightsaber and stuff? There's enough cool stuff in that movie that it made you question. It's just they landed the plane in the next 2 so terribly.
It was a super typical J.J. Abrams joint where it was just a million questions and no answers, and then they hired a guy that
with
didn't
terrible
want to answer any
answers.
questions. Yeah.
So I'd go Phantom Menace and then Solo, but I could be convinced otherwise.
You mean Force Awakens then Solo?
Oh yeah.
I'd say Solo is the one. I've only probably seen it once, maybe twice. I do not remember it that well, so I'm okay.
Yeah, I think I've only seen it twice also.
Yeah.
I remember not hating, was it Aaron Eckhart? Is that his name?
I didn't mind him.
hate his performance as Han.
No.
I actually didn't hate Lando, like Donald Driver, is that, or Donald Glover, I mean?
Donald Glover,
yeah.
Like, it was a kind of a fun take on Lando. I hated the stupid droid.
That was the biggest problem with it in my mind. I thought,
and even just like the whole like slave
Right.
But
well,
yeah,
I kind of put that whole side story in terms of the droid with the hips and the liberation of the droids. I thought that whole side story, if you took that part out, I think it actually would have been a pretty decent movie.
Yeah.
He was a very convincing Solo. I thought the fact that he got his heart broken, the fact that he learned to shoot first, like I think all those things, they were really, really good.
Yeah,
So,
I'm actually looking forward to getting to that one as I'm watching through, because I just don't remember it that well, and be interesting to see.
There are a few things like finding out that like he got the name Solo because he signed up as a single, like just silly little things. It's just like you didn't need to answer everything.
Yeah,
if you
that
don't
was
have a
my
good answer
problem.
for it, don't do it.
I liked the shoot first thing.
Yeah.
I hated everything else. That was like here's why Han is like this, or here's why Han does this. I thought all the other ones were really contrived.
Right.
But whatever.
I think this was supposed to be one of many of those side story movies, right? But it performed so poorly that
and I think it
kinda shut down.
performed so poorly just because there was like Star Wars fatigue at the time. They were just releasing way too much stuff.
Yeah, it's like Marvel, right? It's just
yeah.
there
And it
is
wasn't
too
good
much.
stuff.
Yeah.
It'd be different if it was like, well, as we said, they were releasing a lot of Marvel stuff leading up to Endgame, and that I wasn't fatigued at that time, but
Yeah.
if it was good, it'd be different. Rogue One, I thought though, like as I look at that list, I think the biggest surprise for maybe some people is how highly we ranked Rogue One, and we should almost do a whole episode on that, or do something for the patrons and do it behind the scenes, because Rogue One was fantastic, and I have like 20 reasons why.
Yeah. So
Well,
what did we do there? The more I'm talking about it, the more I'm thinking Force Awakens over Solo myself.
Yeah, we did.
I put Force Awakens over Solo. Yeah. The crazy thing with Rogue One, it was written by a guy. I know him. I used to watch a podcast that he was in. His name's Gary Whitta, and he's actually a really good writer, but he is one of the most woke human beings you'll ever meet, ever. The
problem is, again, like Rogue One is a miracle that it doesn't suck, because again, like that went through multiple directors, multiple writers, like just so typical of the Disney era Star Wars. Nobody can get their act together, and they're firing people left and right, and like just crazy.
Yep, but it ended up being really good. So I wouldn't expect anything else from Gary Whitta to be good, because he's just not a great guy, but he did a great job here. I like where we have it. All right, well, there you have it, listeners and viewers. Just a recap of our order, the official Reforming Nerdom Star Wars ranking. We have Empire Strikes Back at number 1, A New Hope, Return of the Jedi, Rogue One, Revenge of the Sith, Phantom Menace, Force Awakens, Solo, Attack of the Clones, Rise of Skywalker, and then The Last Jedi. Boys, we good with that? We're good putting a pin on that?
I think we nailed it.
All right.
We nailed
Cool.
it.
If you disagree,
I don't even think it's debatable.
yeah. So,
Agreed. Ben
but
is
you should,
inviting you to debate him on this.
but you should come and join our Patreon and come and debate us in a very spirited but loving kind of way. And we would love to hear your thoughts. So please, leave a comment or join us over there. But thank you again for joining us for Reforming Nerdom. And again, you can, as a reminder, you can follow us on YouTube, check out our videos there, on podcast services, and like we mentioned, over on Patreon. But until next time, stay nerdy.